Welcome back to the Garden Hutch. Today we'll discuss the opening salvo of Garden Wars 2023. Let's get going. Well, it is no secret that the pest pressure here in Zone 7B can be incredibly intense. In fact, it's not exaggerating to say the majority of my time from late spring through the entire summer is spent battling pests and diseases, just trying to get the most that I can from my garden spaces. So yesterday, while I was doing my garden inspection, I noticed that I had a bit more plant damage than usual, so I did a little bit of a closer inspection. And when I did that, I realized that the opening salvo of Garden Wars 2023 had begun. So before we take a look at the plants, I just wanted to go over the things we use to address pest infestations. The first thing we use is diatomaceous earth. From now on, I'll call it DE just because it's shorter. Now, we use DE to take care of any insects. Any insect that diatomaceous earth comes in contact with, it's going to kill. It is not a chemical, though. It is organic. And so what we like to do is we like to apply it in the evenings. That way our pollinators and such aren't out. We also like to avoid any areas with flowers or that are actively blooming. The reason for that is we don't want any of our beneficial insects, the things we're trying to get into the garden, to come in contact with the diatomaceous earth. The second thing that we use here on the homestead is neem oil. Now, neem oil, I like to use the cold-pressed organic neem oil. I've tried several different kinds, and that's the one that seems to work the best. We mix it up just like it says on the directions. We just mix it with a little bit of Dawn dishwashing liquid. I use it in a spray bottle. A couple years ago and last year, I used it in a larger spray bottle, like a 2-gallon sprayer. I didn't care for using it that way, so now I just use a little hand sprayer. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's go take a look at the plants themselves. I want to start here with the potatoes because that's where I saw the infestation. So when I came out yesterday and I was walking through the gardens, I noticed there were a bunch of these red and black beetle looking things. They're real small. I'm trying to see if I can find one that got stuck in the DE here. If I do, I'll show you. But they're black, got little red stripes on them. I believe they're called potato bugs. But since we're kind of new to growing potatoes, it's kind of the first time that I've seen them. Oh, here we go. That fella right there. That's what it looks like. Anywho, so I saw this, and what I did, come out and I started sprinkling DE because it was later in the day. So once I got done with that, I decided that I would go ahead and check the rest of my plants. And boy, was I in for a surprise. But before we go take a look at all of those, I just wanted to say, yesterday you could see these beetles all over this plant. And just overnight and into the morning, you can see it has taken care of most of the problem. Now, I will leave the DE on these plants until probably tomorrow afternoon, and then I'll go through whenever I do my normal watering schedule and take them off of the leaves. The reason for this is none of my potatoes are currently blooming. If my potatoes were blooming, I would have to be less liberal with the distribution of the DE. But because they're not, I could go ahead and just be a little bit more liberal with it and try to address the infestation right off the bat. In the same garden area as our potatoes, I also noticed that my basil plants had just a few bites off of them. You can see here on this leaf, there's also a few holes in this one here. So while I had a little extra DE out here, I went ahead and sprinkled them. Again, the reason I was as liberal as I was with the DE in these areas is only because there's really nothing flowering over here at this point. Again, if the tomatoes or the basil, either one were flowering, I would have been much more specific in the areas that I put the DE. But I felt really confident that I could get that in there without worrying about it too much. The other thing I wanted to point out here is, here I put a little bit of it on the ground because I noticed some of those red beetles that I was trying to get rid of had kind of migrated. Those were the only areas I saw them. So I went ahead and dusted them just to make sure they didn't get in anywhere else in my beds. Before we move out of the old garden, I just wanted to note real fast that my radishes, the leaves on them are also getting a few bites taken out of them. However, I did not dust those. There's a couple reasons for this. They're planted between the marigolds and the zinnias, both of which are currently blooming, so I didn't want to take the risk of hurting any of the beneficial insects. Also, the radishes have started to form, so in the next 5 to 10 days, I'll be pulling those radishes out anyway. So in my mind, the cost benefit of that, it wasn't worth it to put the DE out and risk hurting anything that was going to be beneficial long-term to the garden. Of course, your mileage may vary. So here in the top garden, there were several different things that we had to address. The beets here, I also went ahead and dusted last night because, look at this. See how that leaf right there was already eaten? And I did not want to take a risk in losing my beets. I have really enjoyed having beets the last few years. I tried something a little new in growing them, and so I'm going to be a little stubborn about protecting them. I want to learn how to grow beets. It's one of my weak points right now. So in this battle with pests, this is an area that I want to pay special attention to, at least for the next several weeks until the beets are ready to come out. Another area that we had to address here were the kale and the Swiss chard. Now, I originally saw this because I saw these little bites, like so, in our kale. And I thought that something was chewing on the leaves from a bug standpoint, so I went ahead and put the DE on there. When I came outside this morning to check on everything, for whatever reason, I didn't think about these being brassicas yesterday. And so I looked on the bottom side of these leaves, and on the bottom side, they were full of worms. I left this one here. You can see this guy, right? These guys will chew up your brassicas if you do not get rid of them. This one single worm will wipe out a leaf in about a day and move on to the rest of your plant. They can also burrow into the stalk and kill the entire thing if you're not on your game. This is where the neem oil comes in. In this situation, what I do is I've got the neem oil mixed. I'm bringing it out here in just a second. The important thing to remember, though, is that if you spray the neem oil on the front side of these leaves, it's not going to do anything to that worm on the bottom side. And that worm will just continue on eating your plant, work its way down into the stalk, and there goes your kale plants. Obviously, we're trying to avoid that because we're excited about the dinosaur kale. Now, over here, the chard does not suffer from the same worms that the brassica does, but you can see there were things that were nibbling on these guys. So I went ahead and put the DE on them. I did an inspection here on the backside, and just to kind of show you, and there's no worms back here. You will notice, though, that the leaves that have the diatomaceous earth on them, or I'm sorry, the ones that have the bites taken out of them, they will get a little bit more flimsy than the other ones because they're being attacked, I would assume, right? It kind of makes sense. But because of that, we like to remove those as soon as possible, just so that they don't wilt down, get on the stalk, and cause some sort of infection. Or sometimes the decaying matter will actually attract other insects, that are not beneficial. So being able to either remove those, put them in your compost pile where that sort of thing is beneficial, that's what we like to do, just to avoid any sort of complications. Let's take a look at these ground cherry plants. They are coming along nicely, but you can see these little bites all in them. Ground cherries share pests with eggplant. These are flea beetles, and we absolutely despise flea beetles here on the homestead. So what I'll do is I will go through this morning while the leaves are wet, and I will dust these guys. I didn't do the ground cherries last night beforehand because I wanted to wait until the leaves were wet so they would hold them. I'll let these sit on here for a couple more days than I do, say, the chard and the kale, which I'll wrench off tomorrow. I'll probably leave the DE on these ground cherries for about 72 hours, just because flea beetles are so difficult to get rid of. And again, the ground cherries are just something that we grew last year. We love them, and we don't want to take a risk on these pests ruining our gardens already. Battling pests is a year-long endeavor. There is no doubt about it. And let's be honest, we're going to lose a battle from time to time. But if we stay diligent and we stick to our guns, we can win the war. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, hit that little thumbs up button below. It really does do a lot to get us recommended to other folks. If you enjoyed this content, we put out 3 videos each week. So there's bound to be something you enjoy. If you hit that little subscribe button and the bell icon, YouTube will let you know when we upload new garden videos. Till next time, I hope everybody takes care of themselves. Peace.